If you want all of your data in one place, if you want a single home for all of your entities, if you want to spend more time working and less time searching, you need the Intuit ERP. I know because I'm Damon John, and I run my growing business on Intuit Enterprise Suite, the AI native ERP that's powerful, painless, and proven. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the Pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast where we teach you a single shot or strategy every single episode. I am Michael O'Neill here in sunny Long Beach, California. I'm joined by Mircea there in Boca Raton, Florida. Hello, my friend.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm back off a nap. I've been taking a peptide now for the last month or so, and whenever I take it, the next day gives me a little lethargy. So sometimes I have to take a midday nap. And I'm very refreshed after this one, so I'm excited to talk twoies today.
Definitely, let's do it.
Well, you and I talked about this a couple years ago. This is something that was still at that time a relatively new, especially at the kitchen line. And what I mean by that, this is the two-handed backhand dink generally. I mean, the twoie in general, but specifically that two-handed dink roll when you're on the left-hand side. When you learn that, it opens up crazy offensive options. But it's one of those things that a couple years ago, you only saw a handful of people do. And now when I look around my courts at Los Cab in Long Beach, first of all, if you're under the age of 25 or a female, you're doing it. I don't see anybody that's not doing it. And this is as opposed to that more traditional one-handed slice dink where it's a little more defensive. Having this twoie in your arsenal gives you a ton of offense. And you, sir, are right in the process of learning it. So you are embracing the suck of learning something new and having to miss a bunch of balls when you're playing rec. And I just wanted to dig into that as someone who's obviously achieved a lot of success in the pro pickleball world, what it feels like for you to kind of start from scratch and be a beginner at a particular shot.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because I'm definitely a beginner in a sense. When I grew up playing tennis, I had a two-handed backhand, and it was actually my favorite shot. And one of my strengths when I was playing tennis, once I finished playing tennis and started playing squash, no one has a two-hander in squash. Everything in squash, it's about reach. It's sort of a slice drive with more flat than anything, but it's a completely different stroke in terms of your mechanics because you're only using one hand, obviously. So when I found pickleball, I really only had one hand. It was good enough, and I just got used to it and was able to roll it some. I was able to drive some, not as well as I would like, but I played a lot of singles. I'd always meant to incorporate a twoie, but I was having success with what I was doing, so part of it was having success doing what you're already doing, but the other part was, some inherent laziness or fear or some combination thereof, bearing down and deconstructing a shot that you already have and reconstructing something new. And I had to do a lot of other things besides playing pickleball, so I didn't have multiple hours in a day to commit to doing it, and I still don't, but I've really taken the bull by the horns and committed to learning it, so it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, I did that in 2023. I came from a similar thing where I went from tennis, having a nice twoie, to racquetball and having a one-handed backhand, and I hung in there for about 2.5, 3 years with my oneie, and then I said, the world's going to a twoie, and there's just so much more opportunity. So I kind of buckled down, and we've done some shows on learning a two-handed backhand, which maybe I can touch on if we want to. Maybe I'll do a little bonus thing at the end for those of you who haven't learned it yet. It's hard when you know you're going to dip. That's the hard part, is that as you learn this and it starts finding its way into your game. It's not about drilling it, because you can sit and drill it and drill it and drill it, and you can start getting comfortable with it. But it's when you start trying to integrate it into games And now your footwork, which is the most important part of this shot, might not quite be there like it is when you're drilling. And now you're making mistakes. And it's hard, I think, because most of the time, you play a little bit of rec, but a lot of the times you're playing for real stakes. You're playing in a tournament or playing at, an NPL or a Champions League, whatever it's called now. So you don't want to just make unforced errors, but this thing has to start integrating and finding its way into your game somehow. And if you're like me, sometimes when that happens, when you're 3 or 4 months into working on something, and it shows up in a point naturally, and you're playing with someone who knows you've been working on it, you're like, hey, dude, you see that? I hit the twoie. Like, I actually did it in the middle of a game, and it worked. You know what I mean? Like, do you get excited like that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I sent you a video when I hit a particularly good twoie cross court for a winner on a dink. And I've really been focused on implementing it regularly into rec games. In an ideal situation, if you are able to drill and get some instruction on a new shot, it's really important to start off with the basics where you can just hit against the wall. Try that. So I was trying to hit it two against the wall, just kind of get the feel of it. And then I started doing a little bit of drilling on my own where I actually literally just toss a ball and then just hit a twoie, or have someone toss me a ball and then hit it that way. And there's a lot of different aspects of this. There's different levels and there's different shots. There's your return. There is a passing shot if you're playing singles. There is a third shot or fifth shot with a twoie when you're playing doubles. Then there is the transition zone if you choose to hit a two-hander. And in that scenario, I typically don't. And there's also the kitchen where you're dinking, and then the speed-ups. The easiest things are the returns and the speed-ups. For me, at least, those have been the easiest ones. Then the thirds are a little bit more difficult, and the dink is a long-term project, so that's going to take a while.
Yeah, that's the one that takes a while to show up, I think. You reminded me, though, I did a podcasting conference in, I want to say it was the early 2024, or maybe it was 2023, and it was in Orlando, and I got a break for a few hours, and I went to whatever the local indoor place was, and just said, do you guys have a ball machine? And I just sat there for an hour and a half and hit twoies. That's all I did. Like, I was just on the left-hand side, feeding the ball cross court to myself and trying to rip it down the line. I tried every angle I could, but I do feel like if you're at a level where you want to integrate, and this is a big shot, like this is something that's going to be integrated into your game forever. It's not like learning some funky angle volley or something. When you learn a twoie and you get into a two-handed backhand, like you said, there's like 6 different iterations of it that you have to learn. And it's a no pun intended, it's a big swing. I remember when I went to Mike Johnston's drum camp a couple years ago, and this is the guy's a very famous drummer, has a great camp. I'm a pretty competent drummer myself, so I'm not used to being brand new at something. I was pretty good already. But you go into his camp and you get a little rubber Lance Armstrong bracelet that says "Embrace the Suck," because he will instantly identify the thing that you struggle with and he'll make you do it. And you go, God, I feel like I had this and now I don't have it at all. And you're, in front of a bunch of people that are also really competent doing what you're doing, which is kind of what happens in pickleball. You're playing with good players and you don't want to be the one that makes the mistake. But at the same time, you kind of got to embrace it and go, I'm going to push through this part of discomfort, because on the other end, it's not going to be good for all these people. Once you get it down, now all of a sudden you've got something in your arsenal. And to me, that thing of going, wow, I have all of these new angles of offense was the biggest thrill of learning the twoie.
Yeah, you definitely have to throw your ego out the window. And it's really important that you just focus on small steps. Just at the beginning, it's really getting to position, getting your footwork technique lined up, getting your hips lined up, making sure you're making contact. I mean, that's really the biggest thing to start off with. One of the other key concepts that you have to realize as well is the difference between tennis and pickleball is that in tennis, you're mostly hitting from the backcourt with your two-hander, and your right hand is typically dominant in tennis, where in pickleball, it's typically the left hand. When you watch, for example, Annalie Waters, one of the best twoies out there, if not the best, men or women, she is able to create incredible angles because she is using the left hand as the dominant hand, and that's really critical in developing those cross-court angles. And it also helps with deception, deceive your opponent in terms of where you're hitting the ball, also by changing the direction and the dominance of your hand as well. That's one thing that I like, that I can really take the ball down the line or sharp cross court by just suddenly increasing or decreasing the dominance of my left hand.
Yeah, and in fact, the very first thing I did when I made the decision, okay, I'm learning a twoie, I grabbed the dog, grabbed a pair of headphones, went to the local tennis court where they had a backboard or any wall works, and I sat and hit about 45 minutes of left-handed dinks against the wall, just focusing on getting under the ball and around the outside so I can get that proper dip spin on it. And I did that. It's shocking how much footwork matters because you really have to lift up with your legs as you're doing this left-hand dink. And if you hit the ball correctly, you'll hit the wall. And because it's spinning in this sort of top spin, side spin way, it'll actually bounce back to your paddle again if you've spun it correctly. And it's almost like watching a boxer with one of those punching bags where you can just keep doing it and it'll keep spinning back to your paddle. And then you really get into a groove with it. And then after you've done that for 45 minutes, you put that second hand on the paddle. Now you're put to hand, below your other hand, and you keep the exact same motion and you go, oh, that's what it is. And then I take that to the court with someone else doing the same idea. And once you do that, I just have people start stepping back every couple of steps. So you're in the transition zone, and now it requires a little more backswing but more forward push on the ball. But otherwise, the swing is pretty much exactly the same until you get to a drive. When you're in that transition zone area all the way in, it's just a less exaggerated version. And then, of course, when you're at the baseline, you want to rip it, then you sort of take a traditional sidestep tennis type drive. But otherwise, I think you can learn a ton by that 45-minute session on the wall.
I think that the wall training is key, especially learning to use that left hand. And dinking with that left hand is key to start off with when you learn the backhand two-handed dink. I start off most of my drilling sessions by dinking with my left hand and then adding my right hand on that stroke. You really need that left hand to guide where the ball is going. Again, it increases your angle, and it also maintains that softness, because if you just use your right hand, what I learned too is that, and I think at the beginning what I was having the biggest struggle with was that from the backcourt, so basically from the baseline, you're driving through it, and it's pretty similar to tennis. It's pretty similar in when you're at the baseline. But the mistake I was making was the closer I got to the kitchen, I was still trying to hit it the same way on the speed ups, for example, but I was keeping my elbows too tight. What really
helped me... It's a different stroke.
Yeah.
It's a different stroke.
What really helped me is to loosen up my elbows, keep my elbows a little closer to me, and just keep them loose when I'm up at the kitchen line. That made literally all the difference in the world.
When I first started doing them at the line, I was focusing on, by the way, we're assuming we're on the left-hand side for this discussion where we're trying to hit cross-court dinks backhand to backhand, just for this part anyway. And when I was doing that, I would drop my paddle tip to the ground, and I was using my wrist to flip it up. And where I've landed now, my far more consistent version is to have my paddle tip facing almost 45 degrees up, and I'm having more of a locked wrist so that my motion is just a little lift with my elbow. I'm not following through all the way over my shoulder like I would for a drive, but it's a very short, compact swing. But I'm finding that for me, it worked a little better to have my paddle tip more facing up. I'm curious where you are in your journey.
It really depends on the shot. If I'm really able to control it. So let's start.
Let's say it's a cross-court dink you're trying to hit, or a dink roll.
So at the kitchen line, when the ball is below the net and I'm typically going to speed it up, I will dip the tip of my paddle down and then go through it and bring it up. If it's a relatively easy dink.
Hold on though. That you're going straight across there, right? You're not speeding up across court for that.
No, sometimes I am. It depends.
Oh,
it
interesting.
depends.
Okay.
Either way.
I think it's harder to get my paddle angle correct if I dip it too much to the middle. But go ahead.
Again, it kind of depends on the ball, so you have to just try it out and judge it and see what works best for you. And occasionally you speed up cross court because you can do it pretty aggressively. And when you speed up cross court, which we've talked about before, is typically not a great speed up. And if you're going to do it, you don't want to do it cross middle into someone's forehand when they're on the left side. What you want to do is go into their right hip or right at their belly button. The other option is, of course, going straight ahead, which is really nice. You can go straight ahead down the line. Again, this is when you're on the left. So you can speed up down the line, kind of stretch the player in front of you out. If it's a right-hander, you kind of stretch out their forehand. Or you go cross body where you're going into their paddle side body, so right hip, right chest, or belly button, that area. Or if you've opened up the court, meaning if you've pulled them out, or your partner, for example, say your partner's on the right side in the dink, an aggressive dink cross court, and the player right in front of you has been pulled out a little bit, you can go to where their backhand would have been if they're right in front of you. And that's another spot that you can go to, but only if it's been opened up. In that scenario, I often have the paddle tip a little bit down, and then I come up through the ball to generate that spin. A lot of times if I just have an relatively easy dink, but I'm going to go cross court, I'll have the paddle tip either parallel to the ground or the tip will be a little bit up so I can bring it over. Again, it really depends on the ball, whatever you're most comfortable doing.
I'm curious where you'll land with it, because I think right now you're probably in full experimentation zone. And I'm curious what will end up giving you the most consistency that you'll see in tournaments or something like that. But let's talk a little bit about, you're on the left-hand side, you get a relatively dead dink to your backhand, and you're about a foot or 2 feet back from the kitchen line. How awesome is that roll that you can really actually hit harder and spinnier than you could imagine, and you can swing somebody so wide from that shot that is, you might have had it as a one-e, but it's one of the more difficult shots as a one-e, but as a two-e, it's one of the more satisfying. Just, you can rip it. ALW does it all the time. Like, this is her shot, and she'll unload on it. I mean, she'll take a full swing, but I'm curious if you've had a few of those in your journey.
Oh yeah, I've had a few of those. Right now they're kind of few and far between. My favorite ones are the speed up, either straight ahead off the bounce, or sometimes I'll go, again, cross court to the person's right hip. That's often, if you see AL or Annalie loading up, that's a lot of times where she goes. She'll go cross court into the left side player's body, or she'll just go straight down the line with that two-handed backhand. But occasionally she rolls it really sharply cross court, and that's the one you have a hard time doing with one hand. I mean, with one hand, I can speed up straight ahead off the bounce, no problem. And I can also do it cross court, but I can't really do a cross court roll sharp very easily with a one-handed backhand. That's something you really need a two-hander.
One of the things about hers in particular is you mentioned that she's got those options. Man, she's so good at waiting until the last possible millisecond to change her paddle angle and hit that ball. You have to honor the middle on that shot. When you're the left side player, you've got to stay home. But then at that last second, she'll kind of take it a little off speed and, like you said, go so wide with it. And you go, how do you defend that? There's no way to defend that ball. It was over before she hit it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very deceptive shot. It's very effective, but it definitely takes a while to learn. I mean, the steps are, if you do commit to learning this shot, which I highly recommend, you do have to commit to it. It can't be, once a week. And honestly, that's kind of what I was doing at the beginning. Was you
can't
every
work on
once
it
in a while.
rec.
Well, you can work on it in rec for sure. And
no, but I mean, you can't just think you're going to be playing rec and it's going to get better. Like, you have to drill this.
You have to drill it, But you do have to use it in rec, and you have to use it
I don't
relatively
mean not to
regularly.
use it. I'm just saying don't use that as your training ground of just, I'm going to start from scratch and never drill it at all.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
drill
absolutely. You have to drill it. You have to learn the basics. You have to drill the basics, but you do have to use it regularly when you're uncomfortable. So expect for a month or maybe 2 that it's not going to be good. I mean, a minimum 2 to 4 weeks, I would say.
Yeah. I was going to say 3 months is when it starts showing up for me, but I'm different.
That's just the minimum that it's going to feel uncomfortable. After
Yeah.
that, the more you use it, the more comfortable you get. And when you start using it without thinking, that's when you know you're getting somewhere. And I've gotten to the point where I'm thinking about the decisions, still am low on the learning curves, but I'm able to start to control and hit the ball where I want it to go, especially on returns and on the speed ups off the bounce. I'm able to control the ball and have, relatively speaking, know where I want it to go and hit it to that spot. And it's incredibly gratifying.
I was watching MLP this weekend. They just had the finals. And Hayden Patriquin does something pretty interesting. We've talked a little bit about his ability to hunt when he's at the kitchen line. So he and Gabe are so good at playing 6-4, whether they are 6-4 or not. But they're at the line, they're leaning in, their paddles are reaching out, and they're looking for offense. And if it's not there and their opponents hit a good drop, then they'll hit a dink back. But if they can get out of the air and flick it, that is their default. And the other thing that Hayden does by default is he holds his paddle with 2 hands, especially like assume he's on the left-hand side, and he goes for the 2-handed roll dink whenever he can. On occasion, it'll come to his body or it'll be a little more wide outside, and he'll release that second hand and hit a slice dink that we've been talking about forever and ever and ever. But that's not his default. His default is to hit this twoie roll. But the thing I thought was interesting is that his motion and his setup is exactly the same, whether he's hitting the twoie or the oneie. He just releases his hand to hit the oneie. But otherwise, he's still prepping like he's hitting the twoie because that's his default.
Yeah, that's definitely one technique. And to back up a little bit, he started with the twoie. It was actually kind of funny. Like I remember one of my favorite rec games was Dave Weinbach and I played him and Wyatt Stone back in the day. This is relatively soon after I started, maybe a year or so. And it was a lot of fun. We had like a 3-hour session, and you could see that what talent those young kids have. But he started with that. So the player that you want to pay attention to if you are started with a one-hander or going to a 2, a couple of them come to mind, which is Ben and JW. Because JW had a 2-hander in tennis, but when he started off playing pickleball, it was mostly a one-hander and mostly a slice. And same thing with Ben. Ben has one of the most beautiful slice dinks you'll see out there. Obviously, he's the male GOAT. So there's that. But you can see that even for him, for all these years, he really didn't need to change his game or work on that 2-hander until over the last, year and a half or so.
Yeah.
Then he's
last
really,
couple years.
he's committed to learning it, and now he's using it quite regularly. Even for the highest IQ players and the highest skill level players, it still takes quite a bit of time, but don't be too discouraged. I'm telling you, even if you use it 5 to 10% of the time, and even if you only use it on certain shots, it makes a really big difference. And one of the things that's helped me a lot is when people hit a very high drop and it bounces a little bit. When they hit a high drop to my backhand, I used to always have to slice it down or keep it low. Now I can take a 2-hander and hit it more aggressively and angle a little bit, or put a little pace on it.
You can hit a nice fourth.
Exactly. Even if I just used it for that one shot alone.
Yep. It'd be worth it.
I'm totally fine with it.
I have 2 questions. Yeah, I have 2 questions for you. Well, actually, one is that I think the guy that I noticed the most integrating the twoie probably in the last year or so is Jack Sock, who didn't really have any backhand. And he's been aggressively working on his twoie, and it's starting to show up in his games. It's not a weapon yet, but it's way better than what he had. But I was curious about, you've obviously been on the senior pro circuit for a while. I don't see a ton of people doing twoie roll dinks on the senior pro circuit, or do you see that changing as well?
I see it changing slowly. The majority of players definitely have one-handers and one-handed slice dinks, but there are a bunch of players that are starting to integrate it more. More women have been using it in general. And I would say that, I don't know if it's because more women have been playing tennis more frequently coming into pickleball, or that women in general have had two-handers more on the playing tennis. That's one of the possibilities, but definitely female players are the ones that more often have that two-hander role. My mixed partner for the last year and a half or so, Audra Spielberger, she has a two-hander. Been playing with Karin lately, and she has a two-hander, very good two-hander role. So it's definitely getting there.
You can get more torque on it. As a female, you can get more power and torque with a twoie. I'm just watching Anna Bright and Annalie Waters, but Anna Bright, man, when she attacks with that twoie, it is, the torque on that thing is insane to watch. It's like poetry in motion. I don't know how much opportunity there is, but let's talk about where you might use it when you're on the right side. And let me qualify this a little bit. If you and I are dinking and I'm on the right and you're on the left, and I have to hit a twoie backhand, it means it was probably at my left foot, and that should have been your ball in the first place.
Usually, yes.
You know what I mean?
Eventually, you're going to have to hit a backhand when you're on the right side. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Unless you're Colin Johns and you're playing with Ben, then you almost never hit a backhand. But even then, you actually probably have to hit a backhand now and then. So
certainly the transition zone, but not at the net. It's probably more rare.
Yeah, it's definitely less common. But again, senior pro, 50 plus, your partners are not quite as mobile as they were back in their 20s, myself definitely included. You have to be comfortable hitting those backhand dinks. So it's just, again, a matter of practice. If you get a fluffy, easy ball with that on your backhand side, you can definitely speed up straight ahead or, again, inside out to the right-handed player, and you definitely would want to go body in that scenario.
I think where it shows up the most when you're on the right is at the baseline. It would be a third. And I'm notorious for saying I'd rather give you the forehand third than me have to hit a backhand drive type third. But if I do end up getting that ball, if it's going left foot and my partner says I'll typically hit a drop to the middle with my twoie. That'll be the shot that I hit there. I pretty rarely try to drive it from there. Every once in a while I might if I'm feeling it, but pretty often I'm dropping straight ahead or maybe even trying to cornhole drop a little bit to the outside. What about you?
Yeah, the drops have been the toughest. Next to the dinks, I think the dinks are the toughest, then the drops are the second toughest, because you really need, again, to keep your grip loose and to keep your elbows loose. And inherently, when I put a two-hander on there, it's a little bit tougher for me, at least. So that's been one of the tougher things. Also, I feel my defense is good enough with my one-hander. So when I'm in the transition zone, I typically don't use two hands. So I really am going to probably stick with the one-hander there.
So left foot, like if it's down by your left foot, you'll still hit a one-hander?
Yep, I'll hit it. I'll reach out and take it in the air, or I'll hop it.
With your little scoop.
Yep.
You do that little scoopy thing. It's amazing. We need a full episode on how to execute that shot. Because I don't even know what to say. It's almost like an ice cream scoop thing, but it's reverse. One of my favorite shots in pickleball, and one I worked on when I was playing senior pro singles a lot, was if we've served and they've returned, I'm on the left-hand side, I'll talk doubles first. They've returned to the left-hand side line. So it's on the left side somewhere, and I want to do a cross-court drop. So to the left side player's left hand or left side. Man, if you execute that ball well, where you're hitting this lovely dipping drop and you really nail it, it is one of the more satisfying shots in pickleball. And in doubles, it mattered a lot because if people were crashing the net and they were tall, that was one of the only safe spots you had. So I had to work on that shot a lot just to survive in senior pro singles pickleball. But if you had some occasion to go for some of those diagonal, you've got plenty of room, plenty of time. It's kind of a dead return, so you can really get a hold of it. Lovely cross-court drops.
Yeah, I mean, those are really, really feel good when you dial it in. I mean, that's really a nice shot. I'm pretty happy with my slice drop. I've gotten it where I feel like I've gotten it where I want it. And nothing's perfect. So it's always really nice to work on new things and learn new shots, but make sure you're not ignoring your bread and butter shots. So That's, I think, one of the things that people make some mistakes is that when they work on a new shot, like that's all they do and they don't work on their strengths. Like it's really good to work on your strengths as well, at least for a component. If you have a drill session, let's say it's an hour, I would definitely have about 15 minutes or so with your bread and butter shots that you still feel confident with. It also gives you that confidence to get into that drill session, especially if you do it at the beginning. Make sure you're not ignoring your strengths that we can all work on and get a little bit better.
Agreed. And for that particular shot, if you line up on the left-hand side and you have somebody feeding you balls that maybe are a little short, where you're stepping into the transition zone, do your slice drops and do your twoie drops. Like work on them both and work on them middle, work on them cross court, and get those integrated. Again, the more you drill this, we've said it for years now. If you can play 3 times a week and you can drill one of those 3 days, you'll get better exponentially faster than everybody else you play with. If you just play rec for that time, you won't. Even if it's an hour before you play with your normal gang, it will make a huge difference.
One thing that I also want to emphasize is the one-hander is still going to be valuable. The two-handed backhand often doesn't replace one-handed resets, some wide defensive gets, some one-handed dinks if you're stretched out, flicks. Obviously, you have much more reach with a one-handed flick than you do a two-handed flick. Or sometimes like an emergency block when you're getting attacked quickly, then you definitely are more maneuverable with one hand. So
agreed. Yeah, absolutely, especially if you get swung wide and you got to really reach out and grab it. All that being said, Mircea, I'm glad you are working on it. I'm glad you're integrating it. I'm looking forward to getting on the court with you again and seeing how far you've come. Not that we needed you to get any better, but we're always trying to evolve here. So congrats on that, and congrats on taking the big step, my friend.
Yeah, it's a big leap, and I'm working on it, and it's still a work in progress, so we'll see how it goes.
Folks, get that second hand on that paddle for that backhand. Give it a go. Put your favorite tunes on, get on that wall for a while, and then find a drill partner and get this thing down, because it is truly one of the most fun shots in pickleball. Haven't mentioned yet today, but if you need any pickleball gear, Carbon, in fact, has a brand new, really, 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 really cool backpack, and I don't have it yet, but I just emailed Kyle, and I said, you guys have any of those backpacks in? Because it's really awesome. CarbonPickleball.com, CRBNPickleball.com, 402P at checkout for 10% off of whatever they sell. And I'm still loving my Barrage Elongated. So if you guys are looking for a paddle or bags or any of the things, check out CarbonPickleball.com. Until then, for Mircea, I'm Michael. You guys keep on rocking. Enjoy the courts. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.